With 695 episodes spanning across 26 seasons from 1963 to 1989, it's fair to say that the classic era of Doctor Who can be quite daunting when it comes to new viewers. But I want to fix that, so I've decided to take away all the stress that comes with that and put together a definitive Doctor Who starter pack. This will go through each Doctor respectively, including the various jumping on points throughout the show, as well as some of my personal favourite stories from each era, which won't require a whole lot of background going in. First of all, do not start at the beginning. This is one way to put off any potential new fan. And An Earthly Child as a story isn't very good, and I'm a bit of a 60s Who elitist, so you can trust me on that. Episode 1 is decent, but as soon as we get into the Stone Age stuff, the serial becomes a bit of a snore fest and will not grab you in the same way as a lot of the other stories to come will. Also, don't feel obliged to watch the show in chronological order. That's not to say that you won't get anything out of it, and for a couple of seasons that will be beneficial, but overall, classic Doctor Who, like a lot of shows back in the day, are a lot more week in, week out. At least on a story by story basis. Stuff that really should be shaking up your characters are often brushed off quite quickly between serials, meaning that you can kinda just jump in wherever, and it shouldn't take away from your experience. That's how I consume a lot of my Doctor Who, just jump around and have fun with it. So, the First Doctor. Now I know you're looking at these episode titles and want to start with the Daleks, but again, there's better food out there. I generally say the Hartnell era is known most for its historicals, and there are some really good past adventures in this era. I'd recommend either the Aztecs or the Romans. Both really solid stories, decent stakes and set pieces for the time, and hey, you learn something along the way, so you can't really go wrong. A story like Planet of the Giants is very accessible for new viewers. Not the most exciting of plots by any means, but if you just want to dip your toe into the First Doctor's era, then this is still a solid little three-parter with decent stakes, and gives you a good understanding of the original TARDIS team and their dynamic. Now, if you do want to go straight in with the Daleks, then I'd go with the Dalek Invasion of Earth. I think it's a lot sharper than the original Dalek serial, it has a really good scale to the story, and a much better pace to it overall. However, my personal pick would have to be The Time Meddler. This was a story that kinda changed everything, being the first time we actually see another of the Doctor's species. It's a really good story that builds in a satisfying way, with an overlooming threat and mystery keeping us engaged. Also, the character of the monk being this rogue Time Lord who is just out to cause absolute chaos because he feels like it is such a great idea. Unlike more traditional villains, there's no real malicion here. Bro just enjoys interfering with time for shits and giggles. And honestly, you gotta respect it. Master, step aside. If we're gonna bring back another Time Lord foe for the Doctor to face off again in the near future, then please make it the monk. There's so much potential there. The Second Doctor is my favourite classic Doctor. And oh boy, what a treat of an era. Enemy of the World, banger. The Macro Terror, banger. The Web of Fear, banger. The War Games, it's 10 parts long, but guess what? They're all bangers. Also, The Power of the Daleks is probably my favourite Dalek story of all time. I don't know if I'd recommend it as a jumping on point, only because I think 2 does take a little bit to get cooking throughout that story, but everything else and how the Daleks are characterised? Chef's kiss. But I'm getting carried away here. If I were to actually suggest a place to start, then I would go with The Tomb of the Cybermen. A bit of a basic choice, I know, but hey, sometimes basic choices are basic choices for a reason. This is such a strong outing for the Cybermen, definitely top 3 for me. Alternatively, if you want something a bit more fun, then I'd recommend The Mind Dropper, where the Doctor, Jamie and Zoe end up in the land of fiction, where wacky hijinks ensues. Honestly, it's just such a fun time. It is a bit sillier than a few of the other stories I've mentioned already, but I love how creative this story gets, particularly when Fraser Hines, the actor who plays Jamie, is away on holiday for an episode, and how they explain the in-universe recast is so stupid, but brilliant, and I love it so much. But hey, maybe black and white TV isn't for you, and honestly that's fine. It's all about finding what's right for you, and there's still a whole other 20 years of the show to go. The 1970s didn't only bring us Jon Pertwee as the Third Doctor, but it's also when we as a species invented colour, bringing upon a whole new chapter to Doctor Who. But honestly, in all seriousness, unlike my other suggestions, you can kinda just start at the beginning with Pertwee. Spearhead from Space is the perfect jumping on point, not only for his Doctor, but I'd say for classic Who in general. Spearhead very much is the blueprint of what we come to expect with an introduction story, with the focus primarily being on character, with the added mystery and action of a good Doctor Who plot. with episodes like Rose, The Christmas Invasion, 11th Hour, and Deep Breath all taking inspiration from this story. However, something to keep in mind when coming to the Third Doctor's era is that it's not like the rest of the show, at least not for its first couple of seasons. This is when Doctor Who had a little bit of a hit to its budget, and they couldn't do as many off-world stories. Because as we know, space travel is expensive, and the BBC just didn't have that kind of money back then. So a main plot point for a lot of the Third Doctor's run is that following the events of the War Games, the Time Lords have taken away the Doctor's ability to travel using the TARDIS, leaving him stranded on Earth. This means a lot of his earlier seasons are usually set in the one location with a recurring cast of regulars, creating a far more domestic familiarity to what we'd seen before. Characters like the Brigadier, Benton and Yates definitely create this more family dynamic. So if you do choose to jump on here and like what you see, keep that in mind, because I know at least for me, back-to-back 7-parters of the Doctor working in a lab can be a bit of a drag. Then again, my favourite story from this era has them going to and from prison cells every other episode, so maybe I'm not the best authority on this one. But yeah, Spearhead, great jumping on point. Other stories I really like, The Green Death is a strong one, maybe a bit of an odd starting point being Joe's exit and all, but it is a good one. Also stories like The Daemons, if you're into cult stuff, and Terror of the Autons, if like me you want more of those plastic boils in your life. Also it's the Master's introduction, which is cool. He does get around a lot this era. Oh, and The Day of the Daleks is easily his best Dalek story. The Fourth Doctor is undoubtedly one of the most iconic. With his big grin and scarf, this is probably who you imagine when you think of classic Who, and there's good reason for that. Tom's era is packed with classics, making up 7 years of the programme. Like Pertwee, you could probably start with his first season. Robot Axe is a decent transitional episode, bridging the gap well, keeping the familiarity of the unit's setting, but with an eagerness to want to move forward. That said, however, if you want to start with Tom and don't want that baggage, then the following stories, Ark in Space, Sontaran Experiment, and Genesis of the Daleks, all slap. The less said about Revenge of the Cybermen, the better, but nothing can be perfect. Other sorry stories that require little context, Seeds of Doom is up there, and Pyramids of Mars is as classic Doctor Who as they come, with an incredible villain in the form of Sutekh the Destroyer. Or if you're more of a gothic horror fan, then Terror of the Zygons might be up your street. However, the one story that instantly springs to mind when it comes to getting someone into classic Who is City of Death. To me, this serial is one of the most watchable episodes of Doctor Who I think there is. It's just impossible to not have a good time with this one. Robert Holmes really captures the wit and humour of the Doctor, really playing into Tom's strengths. I think Scaroff makes for a really good one-off villain, the location stuff is good, and yeah, you can really see where writers like Stephen Moffat would later draw inspiration for his own era, with stuff like cracks and people being splintered throughout time. It's a must watch for any Doctor Who fan. There are a couple of decent starting points when it comes to the Fifth Doctor, but probably not the ones you're expecting. First off, don't start with Earthshock, it's nothing personal, I just think there were better stories here. Also, as good as the Caves of Androzani is, I wouldn't recommend it as an introduction to 5, if only for the fact that his character is so drastically different here to what we see in the majority of his run. So what episodes would I start with? The Visitation is a particular standout for me, offering a really good blend of historical drama and science fiction. I think the Pterodactyls are such a really cool and unique villain, and the ending with the Doctor having caused the fire of London is such a great little last minute reveal. Also, this might be a bit of a rogue shout, but the Black Guardian trilogy. It does dip a little in the middle for sure, but I think stories like Modern Undead and Enlightenment are honestly some of his best, and as a little mini-series type deal, this could work for you. I wouldn't blame you for skipping Terminus, but that's just me. Modern Undead introduces one of my favourite characters, Vister Turlough, which is a sentence that no one has said before, but the reason I really like Turlough is that he's a little shit, being introduced with the task of having to kill the Doctor. However, he's a bit of a coward, can't really bring himself to do it, but has this weight of the Black Guardian looming over him the whole time, and heck, even when that's all sorted, he's still a bit of a slippery character. And that's what I think makes him interesting. I think we need more characters like that, where we don't fully know if we can trust them. Enlightenment is a really good ending too. All you need to know is that it's boats in space. Just imagine Voyage of the Damned, but it's a race, and nothing really like Voyage of the Damned. Stuff like The Awakening is a pretty safe one too, and if you want to witness an absolute bloodbath, then Resurrection of the Daleks is definitely up there as well. Now 60 is a tricky one, because he only has 2 full seasons, and one of them is an overarching storyline, so it does make things a little bit harder to throw yourself into. And focusing solely on his first series, it is a bit of a Marmite one, with stuff like Time Lash, The Two Doctors, Attack of the Cybermen, and The Twin Dilemma, which I know is technically last season, but shush. That said, Vengeance on Varos stands as a testament to the ingenuity of Doctor Who storytelling, weaving a gripping narrative that delves into the themes of power, corruption, and media manipulation. The episode immerses viewers in a dystopian society where entertainment and governance intertwine in a sinister dance of control, and it's really bloody good. Also, it has to be said just how good Colin Baker is at playing the Doctor. The authority and presence he has on screen is honestly unmatched. He almost has that Peter Capaldi effect where, even if the stories aren't all that, he can usually elevate it with his performance. I also quite enjoy Mark of the Rani too. I don't know if that's a hot take, but I see no one talking about this one. But yeah, if you want to see the Master team up with another rogue Time Lord called Durrani, then there's that. Also, Perry's outfit is iconic in this one. The Seven Doctors era is one of my favourites. If you're a newer fan and wanting a good place to start, and none of these other suggestions have done it for you, then Seven's era could be the one. Now, Seven does take a season to cook. Well, not his Doctor per se, but the stories. I actually quite like season 24 for the most part, but it's by no means good. Other than maybe Paradise Towers. But once we get through that, things will start to feel a lot more familiar, with a format that follows an everyday contemporary Earthbound companion with a far more complex and layered Doctor to what we'd seen before. Also, all of his stories are around 3 to 4 parts long, which means that no story ever feels like it's dragging or overstaying its welcome. Anyway, stories. Remembrance of the Daleks. It's a fan favourite for a reason. Brilliant Dalek on Dalek action. No, not like that. Badass acery, as well as being a pretty important landmark in Dalek history. Yes, there are a couple of references to past things in here, but nothing that you shouldn't already be familiar with from watching the new series. To summarise, it's good. Go watch it. Also, The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, a commentary on the state of the show at the time, and again, it's really good. Honestly, I could recommend most of Seven's era as a strong jumping on place, especially from season 25 onwards, as I do think it set a lot of the blueprint for what made series 1 of the revival work as well as it did. Yeah, honestly, skip season 24, you can go back to it, it's a lot of fun, but, you know. And maybe don't start with Ghostlight, you should be all good. By the way, not a starting point, but I think if you enjoy what you see of Ace, then The Curse of Fenric is an incredible story for her, and one of my all-time favourites of the show. Whoa, what's this? Extra bonus Wilderness Years section. The Wilderness Years is what us fans refer to the gap that Doctor Who was off-air from 1989 to 2005. It's where the TV movie sits, as well as a bunch of other things that fans have either forgotten about or at least wish they could. Sorry, Jenny. The TV movie is not a starting point by any means. I don't really know what I'd call it, to be honest, but I suppose it is necessary if you want to properly experience every Doctor. It's cheesy, it's camp, and the Americanization can be somewhat unbearing at times. However, Paul McGann is electric throughout, and definitely stops this from being a complete flop. It's popcorn Doctor Who. Fun, fast-paced, with an over-the-top villain that you can't help but enjoy yourself. You can also definitely see where Davies took inspiration from when bringing back the show in 2005. All of the footwork of New Who is scattered throughout this movie, from the pacing to even the characterisation of the Doctor going from this traditionally quite strange cosmic individual to the more dashing romantic hero type we'd later get with Doctors like Tennant. But that's not what I want to talk about here. So I imagine a lot of you have probably already seen or heard of this before. It's not exactly unknown, and that is the 1989 comic relief special, The Curse of Fatal Death. Stephen Moffat's first crack at the whip at Doctor Who. And you know what? It's pretty good. Yes, of course it's silly, and he used fart jokes maybe a bit too much, but you can definitely see the makings of greatness throughout. The script is sharp, it's witty, it plays around with time. All stuff that we'd come to expect of a great Stephen Moffat story are present here, and Ron Atkinson makes for a surprisingly good Doctor too. You can definitely see why Russell gave him the job when the show came back. It's a bit of fun, sure, but it has that heart that makes Doctor Who as special as it is. And that's why, despite not being canon, at least within the show's main timeline, I still think it's worth checking out. But with all that said, hopefully the idea of approaching Classic Who doesn't look as scary now. There are many openings throughout this show's 60 plus year history. Honestly, you can just pick a Doctor you like the look of and see how it goes. That's how I started. Then again, my life has been absolutely taken over and consumed by this programme, and I don't think there's ever a way back.